Hi, welcome to Tuesday on TLDCast. I'm Cara North, and I'm joined today with special guest Karl Richter. If you don't know him, you will by the end of today's chat. If this is your first time coming to us, we are the Training, Learning, and Development Cast. We meet here about twice a week, and we are actually open on our Slack channel that is open 24/7. Great conversations going on there. We're actually talking about a DevLearn meetup if you're heading to DevLearn, so everybody can get together. You can connect with us there by going to tldchat.us, and we'd love to have you on there. And yes, J-Rock, this is the overcooked music. I'm glad somebody figured that out, because as Karl will get to here in a minute, he sees himself as a chef. And I have to admit, that's a little bit different than a lot of the other buzzwords that you may hear about learning and development, right? As he giggles.
For sure. Yeah, I do realize it's metaphors. I'm not serving up actual dishes today. So if you're hungry, especially those of you on the West Coast, feel free to grab a snack and chomp along with us here as we get through this. And for those of you who are like me in the Eastern time zone, hey, lunch is right after this. So yeah.
Love it. Well, again, thanks for joining us, and I will get started in the way that we typically always get started here on TLDcast. So, Karl, would you be kind enough just to introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about you, why you live in the best state in the country, just throwing that out there, and maybe how you got into learning and development, because I know you're obviously not native to the best state in the country.
Yes. Yeah. So good questions. It's really a pleasure for me to join you and to be here today. I am a freelancer. I've been building e-learning modules since about 2002, Captivate and Articulate and all those wonderful different programs. I actually got into the world of e-learning in a very roundabout way. I graduated from college in 1996 and I moved to Taiwan and Korea. And I did the teach English overseas thing for about 6 years. And while I was over there, I got really tired. This was like dial-up internet days still. So squeaky, squawky modems, loud, noisy sounds. And then we would get online. And even then, as a 20-something, I was like, this is going to be huge for teachers once bandwidth catches up and it gets a little bit better. So eventually, I moved back from Korea and Taiwan, and I moved to San Diego, and I found an educational technology department. So I'd always been interested in being a teacher and help, give people good ideas and help, ideas are really a bridge to places. So the more smarts you have, the more opportunities you have. So I've always been interested in education, but that experience of being reliant on my computer to connect, and that really changed my opinion. So I went from hating computers to loving them, and then I just started freelancing, building online modules, and here I am just about 20 years later, still doing it.
And why don't you tell everybody where you're located at?
Yeah, I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I met my wife. She was my girlfriend then. We met in San Diego. And her family is from here, and we decided to move here and raise our kids with lots of aunts and uncles. I'm a proud parent of 4 boys, so we left the beach for a good reason, I guess. What's the point of moving out of San Diego for just one kid? We went all in, and we sort of accidentally had 4 kids. So we had twins there at the end. So yeah, I've got 4 boys in 4 years, and I'll talk about them a little bit in our session today.
All right, great. So if nobody has any questions before, Karl, go ahead and take it away, and let's talk a little bit about e-learning blends.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and fire up my PowerPoints and show you a little bit about why I consider myself a chef. So blended learning recipes, I really do think of myself as a chef, and I almost never cook. If I do cook, it's never anything more complicated than macaroni and cheese. Never worked in a restaurant. I don't have any culinary skills, but I feel like a chef because I'm constantly coming up with new combinations of things. I work as a blended learning specialist, and a lot of people sort of say, okay, blended learning, I know what that is. That's online and face-to-face, and that's true. But the way I look at it is it's synchronous. So whether you're using technology, whether you're not, whether you're in a room, whether you're on a webinar, a conference call, any kind of place where people can ask live questions and share an experience together. That's asynchronous learning. Self-study, you all know, online videos, books, the wonderful SCORM modules that are loaded into your LMS. I look at those as sort of things that you do independently and on your own, and whether they're graded or not, those are ingredients that can go in a blend. On the job is really one of my favorite ingredients to put in a blend, that you want to give people the information they need when they need it. You know, society has changed so much, and we'll talk about some of the tools that we use. SCORM stuff could absolutely be considered homework. That's a good point there, Jonathan. But on the job, you know, we want people to be able to look up the information that they need. And then, of course, social learning. These are all sort of different ingredients that we can put in the blend, different things. This is my definition of blended learning. It could potentially include any of these things. So one of the reasons why I consider myself a chef goes all the way back to when I was in grad school. This was 2002. I had just moved back from Taiwan. I was learning and reading a whole bunch about education and how we're learning. These were back in the days where Wi-Fi was still pretty new. So instead of needing your laptop to be tethered to a cord, you could wander around anywhere. It was very freeing to be able to sit anywhere you want in your apartment with a hot laptop on your knees. One of the books that I was reading, now of course, you know, it's so much different. We have mobile phones and we can consume information anywhere. But even way back then, somebody gave me this term. I wish that I could cite them and say that, yes, Infovore is not a term that I came up with, but I read it, you know, 15 years ago, and I thought, oh my goodness, what a great way to describe the sort of primal need that we have, the way we're feeding on information, the way that these new tools are giving us a new set of capabilities. So they're very addictive. Am I the only one who's ever done this? Have you ever checked your smartphone while you're driving, even though you know it's dumb? You're constantly in touch with information now. We're constantly feeding on it. We're snacking on little bite-sized tweets, and we have news feeds, and we have all these different ways that are feeding our brains. So really, is it very William Gibson? Is that who it is? I'll have to look it up. But as a former anthropology student, I just love it. I love that like vor suffix, that wonderful primal sort of need that we have for knowledge and for information. So it takes us back to the land of carnivores and herbivores, where we've got, you know, now we're slowly munching through our email inboxes or devouring Instagram posts. We, as a species, have not survived because of our fangs and our teeth. We have survived because of our smarts. And we really have always had this sort of primal need for information. So I'm going to do a quick thing. You can just answer here. And yep, maybe that is what wisdom teeth are for. I'm going to add that to my big book of food puns. But as an infovore, if you could only pick one food for the rest of your life, let's see. Now, this isn't something that you actually have to do, but think about it. If you could either have fried food or your smartphone, which would you pick? Would you say goodbye to potato skins and chips and French fries and everything fried so you could keep your phone? Or would you keep your phone and say goodbye to all things fried? Again, you don't have to do it. It's a tough choice. And if you're one of those people that's like, I already don't eat fried food, well, just be polite. Keep that to yourself. We're proud of you. The rest of us have urges and cravings. And that's kind of my whole point of this. It's like we have those same cravings for knowledge, for information, for things. So let's see what we got. Smartphone, fries, yeah. Smartphones are low in protein, yes. That's true. And expensive. Yeah, you could deep fry your phone. I think that's sort of the worst of both worlds, but hey, I'm all for creativity. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I really do think that we have parts of our brain that crave fat and salt. And we have this modern diet where we're able to get more of it than we were generations ago because we simply have more options. And information-wise, it's the same thing. Before we had to know somebody who knew something about it. And now we just have to hop online or you know, I guess we could go, yes, watermelon freeze, delicious. So that's really my take, that I think of myself as a chef because I consume information, and my learners do too. So think about them. Are they actually learning? So another reason that I consider myself a chef is really like my role is to feed the brains of the organizations that hire me. So here's a brain. We have a zoom in there of 2 brain cells, and this is a synapse or a neuron. Basically, as we learn new information, the axon on one connects to the dendrite of the other, and they make this synapse. And then as we have those particular thoughts, that synapse fires. And before it gets too nerdy in here, I'm going to bring in a very special guest to help present my cognitive. Does everybody know who this is? That's right. The star of the book Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina, Jennifer Aniston, believe it or not, plays a very important role in neuroscience. So Dr. Medina and his team were putting participants in an fMRI machine, and they were doing these different brain scans, and they were showing the participants different pictures. They'd show them different pictures of different people, and they noticed that when they showed them a picture of Jennifer Aniston, that they saw one of those synapses that would fire. Now, there's billions of neurons. There's billions of these little synapses, these little connections between our brain cells that are in our brains. So for them to find one that would regularly fire when it was showed a picture of Jennifer Aniston was a really big discovery. It's tangible proof that our brains change as we learn. So basically, the cells of these different brain cells, they get a coating of this fat white substance called myelin. And the brain cell gets covered in myelin. And the more myelin that those cells have, the stronger the synapse goes. So a minute ago, Rachel and Ross forever. Aren't you glad they got together? Wouldn't it have been so disappointing if they just went their separate ways? That would be sad. So really, the way I see my line of work is that I'm in charge of feeding the brains of the people that hire me. And my line of work is really to make that myelin coating, that we are forming synapses, that we are building connections in our brain. They talk about neuroplasticity. They talk about how we're constantly learning and taking on new information. This is our role as training professionals. So to stick with Jennifer for just another minute here, some of you, when you saw that first picture, probably not very many of you, but it was that like tip of the tongue. Oh, it's the girl from that one show. I recognize her. That's a thin coating of myelin. You recognize that person, but you don't really know who it is. Maybe you were like me and you're like, hey, that's Jennifer Aniston from Friends. That synapse fired and you knew who it was. You could probably list a couple other great movies. I didn't see anybody say Office Space. I think she's terrific in that. Others of you, unlike me, shampoo commercials, sure. Others of you looked at her and were like, oh my gosh, I can tell by the haircut. This is classic 2006 Jen. So when she broke up with Brad Pitt and hadn't started dating Vince Vaughn yet, I'm not one of those people. I don't have the coating of myelin on my Jennifer Aniston neuron because I haven't put in the same time and done the same expertise. The website's ESPN doesn't talk about her a whole lot. So this is just sort of a good example of really what our role is to engage neurons. We are trying to get those synapses to fire. I've built a ton of online modules. Some of them are terrible. Some of those are my fault. Some are the client's fault. But the worst kind of online module is not just the one where the bullets are coming on as the narrator is reading it. The worst ones are where the seek bar is locked. And you can't push next until the seek bar gets all the way across. So what do? You put all your attention and your energy into watching it go across the slide till it finally reaches the end, and you can click next and go on to the next slide. Now, as a parent, I mentioned before that I'm a parent and that I'm in the unfortunate position of sometimes creating a meal that my kids won't eat. You spend all the same time, you spend all the same energy, you prepare this dish and you give it to kids and they turn their back and they don't want to be in a part of it at all. So really what I think of is, as a parent, I'm really looking for that sweet spot where it's both yummy and it's nutritious. I want it to be good enough that they will eat it, nutritious enough that I want them to. And as a blended learning designer, it's kind of the same thing. Interesting enough that you're going to pay attention. I don't want you watching the scrub bar when you take my training module, but informative enough that you're going to get something out of it. So really, this is kind of the foundation, the idea of the infovore and the idea that you can not only like cook up a module for people, you need to get them to eat it. They've got to actually take it in. Otherwise, it's just kind of a waste of time and energy and money. So really, we want the synapses in your brain to fire. Your brain is a reflection of what you practice. So Dr. John Medina and other people in the neuroscience field could look at a brain scan and see whether you are a violinist or not. Your brain is a reflection of what you practice, the skills that you have. So they're going to be able to look at the part of the brain that controls the finger movement and see that, oh my gosh, you can probably tell that I don't have the dexterity to play violin. But other people can see that. There are physical changes that take place while we learn. It would be great if our brain was just a warehouse and we could just dump stuff off and we could just leave a box there, and when people need it, they go find that box and they pull that out. Sadly, people need practice. They need to hear information multiple times. Those synapses have to fire to actually cause that neuron. So if you introduce something new on a Wednesday and it never comes up again, that ends up being like the vegetables that go in the trash. Can't get in shape by just jogging one time. I would be so fit. I jog every January 2nd. All right, so I consider myself a chef. I use these blended learning recipes to help feed the brains of the organizations that hire me. I like thinking in food metaphors because it opens the world of being creative. It opens the ideas of, how do I get people to ingest these ideas? How do I get them to take it in? How do I get them to crave this information? So I've got some different ideas for different things that we want. It's very easy. Just looking at this slide makes me want to yawn, but it's very easy to get stuck in a rut and to keep serving up the same thing again and again. My kids rolled their eyes the other day when I gave them macaroni and cheese because I make it every Saturday. You've got to mix it up in your learning designs. You've got to mix it up in your culinary reasons. So it's fun to just look at different learning technologies. And this is actually one of my favorite learning technologies. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be complicated and have VR goggles and software to download. Technology is simply any tool that gets the job done. Now, the sticker on the fire extinguisher is a wonderful example of simple technology. It's a sticker. It's on the side of a fire extinguisher. And people are actually able to go in with no training. You don't have to learn the history of the fire extinguisher, advances in fire extinguisher technology. There's none of that. There's none of that goes in there. It's simply, what do you need to get the job done? So that's how I think of technology. Give the information they need when they need it. So I'm going to go ahead right now. I'm going to take a sip of water. If you have any questions, fire away. Otherwise, I'm going to share a few of my blended learning recipes.
Karl, we do have a question in the Q&A from Mark, and I don't know if you wanted to do this now or maybe later, but he's curious about if you've studied psychology and neurology as part of your training background, and has it helped you in creating your training solutions?
I studied anthropology, so I'm all about our primal urges and what it is that we crave and sort of what we as a society do, how we work together. I've read some brain rules books and I'm interested in neuroscience, but aside from the occasional book, no formal training in that. I see some good Carmen Simone suggestion there, but yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
That's all I saw in the Q&A. So
I'm doing my best to keep up with it. When I got disturbed there, it was my iPad that I'm looking at the chat on timed out on me. So hopefully that won't happen again. If my eyes go cross-eyed, that's why. But I wanted to just kind of share some of the recipes that I have. This one came in grad school. If you know Dr. Allison Rossett, she's wonderful. She's in the Training and Development Hall of Fame. She's done a lot with job aids and performance support. For me, her biggest impact was a paper that she did on blended learning. And really what she described training as was, think of it as a bookend blend. that you have something that comes before the event, you have something in the middle, and then you have something afterward. So it could be anything, any kind of warm-up. That email that just says, hey, you're going to training on Wednesday, it's room 6. That could have something in there so that it's more than just the information on it. You want to fire those synapses. Hey, here's a 2-minute video. How would you respond? Send it in. That can be a warm-up. As instructors, I look at all kinds of ways to find creative, mouth-watering ideas that people can use to before an event, during an event, after an event. And sometimes events aren't really even in person, that it could be a lot more than that. So I shared my definition of what blended learning is: synchronous, asynchronous, or self-study, on the job, and social. Any of those different kinds of ingredients. What's fun about being a learning designer, at least what I like about it, is that you have lots of options. My favorite part of the project is the start of it. When we're learning about goals, we're trying to find out what we're trying to accomplish, what little seeds we're trying to plant in our learners' heads. And then we look at the tools and we find ways to do that. So one of my other favorites is handy handouts, I call it. I like to have somewhat catchy names for things. E-learning modules are great, but they're not great for going back and looking anything up. It's hard to do like a quick reference thing. So one of the things that I like to do is I make it either a printable handout that people can fill out with pen and paper if they like that, or something where they have fill in the blanks where they can go in and actually type in some of the answers. But give them a chance to like print it up or take notes. Some people, just the act of going and writing and doing that, this is one of like the easiest. Yeah, it's a build it yourself job aid, Ruby. Perfect. Or I literally go through and I take my 5 learning objectives and I write them out in sentences and I just remove a word from each sentence. And then as a review, as part of the course, it's like, hey, you know, blended learning includes these 3 plus, so people can go through and to actually fill in that blank. There's a part of you that sees a blank that needs filled in and you feel compelled to fill it in. So it's very nice. You can even, here's a quick tip. I love making screen recordings, so I did this for us. You can go in, customize your slide size. Whenever I do my handouts, I always just use PowerPoint. If you've ever tried to build a handout in Word and then the formatting gets all crazy, so change it to letter paper. I do it when it's blank. And then I've got like a tall PowerPoint. So a tall PowerPoint like this makes it really easy for you to build a handouts that people can use. Yeah. Has anyone used QR codes? I have one here just as an idea. You could have your handout, use a workbook where it's like, watch the video and then jot down your notes on how you'd handle the situation. Come to class about that. Or here's a QR code with a link that takes you out to resources.
If I can, Carl, you actually have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Thomas, about basically how do you use these QR codes? Would you be kind enough to share that a little bit with the audience?
Have I done a project with them? No. Have I imagined it? Yes. Having said that, the QR codes could be something that people would use with their phone. Google Chrome has a QR code reader built into it. So basically you hold your phone up to that and it'll pull up a web page for you. So that's something that, you know, I pitched this to a manufacturing client of mine where it was like, hey, we want people to have safety on all the different tools. So they make electronic connectors. It's a great company. And I was trying to say, hey, what if we have a quick job aid that's up there with like the top 3 things that you need to know, but there's also a QR code where you can click and see the documentation, or you could click and see more in-depth training. So that really is kind of the intermediate between AR and VR.
If I may, Carl, J-Rock kind of called me out in the chat, but I have a learner engagement presentation that I do that I split people into different case studies, and then depending on which kind of angle they chose throughout the presentation, the QR code takes them straight to their case study, gives them the information, gives them like a Google Doc so they can work together, put it together, and then also make their own little mock presentation about what they found. So it is super easy to use.
Yeah. I mentioned how surprised I was that the term Infovore never caught on. I'm still really surprised that QR codes haven't caught on and been a bigger thing, where it's just easier to take something from the physical world and then go, there's a digital version of just about everything now. Every mom and pop shop has a website, and everywhere there's links to this and that. They're just so nice because it saves you having to type in everything. You just hold it up and boop. And Cara, that was a great example. I'd like to hear more about them. But yeah. Anything else? Should we move on? I think you kind of get the idea of handouts.
You have a couple other questions here in the Q&A if you want to go ahead and tackle them or wait toward the end. I'm trying to think of where we're kind of at. You do have a question from J-Rock about the blending, and if you find one ingredient that's the easiest for you to use in your recipes versus which ones are tougher.
I tend to use Storyline a ton. I like Rise. I like the articulate products. PowerPoint's universal, and it's really easy for people to use. My favorite ingredient is just live people in a room with a plan. Not just live people in a room with no plan. That's frustrating. But yeah, I think there's a magic that can happen with people, especially charming people that have clear goals and things that they're trying to work with. But yeah, as far as tools go, I love Camtasia. I love Storyline. I don't know if I'm really answering your question there, but I've got a couple other recipe ideas here that maybe that'll help give you some food for thought. And we even have a food pyramid, a blended learning food pyramid.
Nice.
So maybe we'll kind of answer that as well.
That's a good teaser. So I say let's keep on keeping on, and then we will get to the rest of these questions.
Okay. So this is one called the New Hire Drip. Drip campaigns. I use a tool called MailChimp, but you want short synapse firing emails at regular intervals. You can have, instead of giving somebody a ton of information on their first day, why not say, hey, I'm going to show you where the resources are, and we're going to send out new emails to help you get up to speed. You'll get one. So, you can have an email campaign that has multiple links to resources. That's like the biggest challenge for a new hire is when do you, all the information, all the systems we've got to use, all the places there are to go stuff to go and find the different things that you need. And of course that has to be customized for your role. So these email campaigns can actually, they're pretty sophisticated. So if I put 5 links in there and one was for engineering and one was for sales and one was for manufacturing, based on the one that you pick, I'm going to know kind of what your role is. And then I can fire off a different email to you for that. So this is one that I also haven't built, but I love the idea of it, where it's like, hey, you know what? We've got so much information in our lives, and email is great because it's mobile and people are used to it. So if it's like a source for information, I think this is a fun, and it taps into the idea of spaced repetition, where, you have a single event, like I was talking about with synapses firing. You can't just jog one time and all of a sudden you're in shape. You can't just learn PowerPoint by watching a video. You have to get in, you have to do it, and that has to be spread out over time for it really to work. So this is a good, easy way for it to do it, and it's in seconds. I'm scrolling through some of our chats there. I didn't realize it wasn't updating. Spaced repetition is wonderful, so wonderful. I think it needs said one more time. We'll space that out a minute. Spaced repetition is a good thing. Here's another blend that I like. I call it the Empowering Policy Quiz. A lot of times I try and promote the behavior you want people to have on the job. So it's like, hey, if you're not sure what to do when you're on the job, what should you do? You should go and look at the procedure document and find out. Or, ask somebody is not the best place. You want to go to the source of information. So this is one I did for a dental client. I know nothing about core buildups or endodontic issues, but basically we explained how patients get reimbursed. And then we said, here's some weird situations that you may not know how to document or not. So go ahead and click the resource. You see that little green triangle on the top there. It says view checklists. So you can actually use the policy documents to go through and answer the questions in the quiz. So I just think that's something far too often we get caught like, oh, I want to reinvent the wheel. We're going to go ahead and I'm all for having a quick summary of one of those documents, because a lot of times they're really unwieldy and they're hard to learn from. But you want to have, like, maybe a summary and key things to know. But don't be afraid to link out to those different resources in your training. There's no reason they should be separate. So, yeah. So I had a contract with, Mike's got that great MailChimp course. I had one with the e-learning recipes, but I fell behind on them, so I had to disable it. I haven't written enough of them. But this webinar warm-up or wrap-up, this is an idea I got. I had a contract last year with TIAA, and they used a tool called Allego, ALLEGO.com. It's a very interesting platform in that learners, we were working with financial advisors. And we would have them actually pull out their phone and do little, like, real world style reflections and record those and send them back. And the trainer would look at them and they'd pull them up and look at them together as a group in class sessions. So Allego is wonderful. It also, I believe it was in the neighborhood of 500,000 for them to implement that. And that's simply a really big slice of a budget, maybe 2 or 3 of somebody's budgets. For them, it was a good decision and it made a lot of sense for what they were doing. But I was just thinking, hey, couldn't you do the same thing with WebEx or whatever other tool that you use? A lot of them will let you have a private room where you can go in and you could set up your own thing. Flipgrid looks good. I'll have to go and check that one out. Thank you. But so basically, if you just gave people 3 questions, maybe this is before, maybe this is the wrap up, maybe this is the pre-work, maybe it's something that they would do once they've had the training. But it's like, answer these 3 questions. It should take you 3 minutes on this thing, and then send the link in. We can go ahead and, Karen would have a link to Karen's little 3-minute thing, and Paulo would have a link to his, and Jane to hers, so that we could use the technology we have. As if you're an instructional designer, when you're like, man, all I have is multiple choice and true, false, and some short answer questions, you leave a lot of good instructional content on the table. If you're doing an e-learning course, you can't actually pull it in and get a true reflection, particularly for something like sales. How would you handle this objection? I don't know. I can't do that in Storyline or Captivate or any of those. Yeah. Yeah, Jane's a YouTuber with that green screen. I actually have my very own green screen. I'm going to make you seasick right here. So I was doing a little green screen prep here. Hopefully that worked and didn't make anybody sick. But yeah, so Jane's got that. Oh, wow. So I'm a chef, and maybe you are too. I'm going to pause for just a minute and ask you guys, you've been super chatty already. So what technologies could you combine? Which different tools could you use? Which audiences could you work with that you could cook up some kind of blended learning for your learners?
As we're waiting for a response, we are trying to use MailChimp in my department here at Ohio State for segmenting audiences because we have a newsletter that goes out to faculty, staff, and students. And so we want to see if we can segment. If a faculty member needs more help with the learning management system, we can get them kind of on a drip for that, for like pro tips. If a student is wanting to attend our workshops, we can get them kind of on a drip for that to learn more about our workshops and recordings. So I'll just throw that out there. It's something we are experimenting with.
Cool. I hope you tweet about it. I know you're much better at Twitter than I am, but I hope you share some of that and that I catch it. AR,
looks like we've had stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we see some good ideas trickling in here. Eric, job aids and reference cards. Yeah, 8 weeks to 4 weeks. That's the whole thing, Ruby. That's how my business makes money. It's like, let me help you get new hires useful quicker. Let's use the technology we have in new ways to capture that. The modern learner is used to online. We can do that. Yeah, and then Mark brings up XAPI, which as a blended learning person, it's like, great, I've got all these ingredients in my kitchen, all these things that I would love to use. Just being able to track whether someone scrolled to the bottom of a PDF, like that's great. That would be really nice. So I've done some dabbling in XAPI, not well enough that I can really say, hey, you know what works great is this and this, like that. But yeah. Yeah, we stop recruiting them, Jonathan Rock, because they just walked in the door. No, see, people make that decision on whether they're going to stay with a company or leave during that first week. So if you're giving them the resources and they're feeling like they can find their way around and that it's a good place that has a good plan and a good space for them, they're much more likely to stay. And MailChimp's cheap. That's not a huge investment. Yep. Yeah, one day where you come in and sit in the company boardroom and then you know everything. You're one of us now. Awesome. You guys are fun. So let me go ahead. If you have other ideas, by all means, please share them. Really, this is designed to help you come up with creative solutions and look for different ways. We all fall into the rut. There's so much of good, Jack Hutchinson. That's wonderful to hear. So really, like, as a chef, I think people are more inclined to take chances, unless you're like me and you're cooking for a bunch of little kids. Like, don't be afraid to mix things up and make sure that you have a good mix of color on your plate. If people are only getting instructor-led training and only really dull, like page turner e-learning modules, there's a lot of information that there's a lot of nutrition their brains need that they're not getting. They're not getting those reference guides. They're not sharing and learning with each other, for example. So this is kind of my take. Don't those tater tots look delicious? I made my kids fish sticks, tater tots, and macaroni and cheese the other day. And my wife was like, you cannot do that. You've got to have a good mix of color. And I was like, oh, that is so perfect for what I'm going to show here next. So it's also an ode to butter. Butter was one of my favorite things. The Kentucky State Fair is in action. And we're going down there this weekend to have some, I don't know, deep fried something. There's deep fried everything. So kind of sticking with this metaphor, it's like which learning technologies are on your learners' plates. So I've gone through and I have a longer version of this. This is just kind of a quick little version of it. But basically, I see instructor-led training. That's always, or synchronous training is always kind of the main dish. That's your fish, that's your chicken, that's your pork, that's whatever, tofu patty if you like those. That's the star of the show. The online resources and all those things are great, but your main dish really should be the synchronous learning. I think that online modules and self-study modules are a lot like carbs. You can find them late at night, just like carbs. You can't find a salad at midnight. You can find French fries. There's all kinds of wonderful carby things that are out there. They are cheap. They are easy to track. There's a whole lot of value to having these. You need that energy. You would be silly not to do some online training. But if you do only online training, if you eat only baked potatoes all the time, you're just going to feel sluggish and bloated. So main dish, you don't make friends with salad. That is so true. Yeah. Crackers or chips. Jack, I had a bowl full of croutons. I was out of lettuce. I had a salad just made out of croutons the other day. Which brings me to my next point, vegetables. I think vegetables are really like performance support tools. They are cheap. They are easy to prepare. And sadly, most people don't get enough of them. So we've got our main dish. We've got our carbs. We've got our vegetables. We've got dessert. Dessert oftentimes is someone's favorite part of the meal. Those are kind of like learning games. I think games are wonderful. I think they are a terrific way for people to learn because you can learn from mistakes in training. Don't learn from your mistakes on the job. If you do make mistakes, please learn from them on the job. But our support system should give people a chance to fail and learn from it. The psychological difference between not beating the boss level and getting on to the next level in a game versus taking a quiz and failing and having to try again. It's like a world of difference. So yeah, dessert I think has 2 S's. Did I have a typo in there? But basically desserts, just beware of empty mental calories. Don't give them some cool fish game that's really fun to play, but all they do is worry about catching fish and they're not actually catching what your content is. There's a fine line for it. A monster slaps you when you fail a quiz. So my favorite thing, this whole bizarre food pyramid idea came, I was doing a coaching session with somebody and I was talking about worksheets, and I said that a little bit of printed material is just like a little bit of butter. Anybody who cooks, even an occasional cook like me, you put a little bit more butter in there than it says you're supposed to, what's everybody do? Man, this is really good. This is delicious. Oh boy, I like these green beans. Yeah, I just put more butter on them. So I kind of think it's the same thing with worksheets, with printed material, just a little bit. Like, don't leave me dangling out there with nowhere to do, nothing to focus my energy. So a little bit more printed material can make all the difference. Now, you wouldn't put butter in your breakfast cereal. That's gross. You wouldn't use printed materials everywhere. And I'm not saying like print up all 60 of your slides. That really is like the deep fried stick of butter that I could get at the fair tomorrow. Yeah, so basically that is my food pyramid. You've got your main course. You've got your, here we go, zoom in a little bit. Serve up what they need when they need it. Make sure they get enough greens on their plate. That's probably the one thing that really overlaps well between the actual food pyramid and Karl's silly blended learning food pyramid. 2 S's, they're extra special. Okay, good to know. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share a couple of my takeaways from this sort of first part that I've done here. Don't be afraid to spice it up, mix together new ingredients, and engage the learners in multiple ways. That's like my biggest takeaway for like, what do you want to do in blended learning? Don't look at it as just a one-time deal. That's sometimes the reality is we have to do that, but you want to be looking for different ways to engage your learners. And by engage, I mean to get their synapses firing. Making them do stuff that they're not paying attention to is different. And that you always want to find the sweet spot of both interesting and informative. They're not going to remember it if it's not interesting. I'm going to pause for comments real quick, and if not, we're going to go on and talk a little bit about elephant food. I'm going to put my my Twitter and my YouTube up there. Cara, do we have any sweet and sour sauce? Yep, there's a reason. So many people love it.
We do have a couple questions that I think will segment nicely as you go into the elephant and rider analogy. So this is from both these are from Jonathan Hill. He says that he loves the metaphor about cooking and being a chef. And have you thought or having recommendations on using any similar analogies in training delivery?
Oh, just sort of in general using analogies. I love analogies because they piggyback on what you already know. I've already got a mental framework for how the food pyramid works and what, carbs and protein and all those kinds of things. So I do a storyline workshop that is also based on metaphors. It is called Slides on Steroids. And we look at all the different triggers are a steroid, variables are a steroid, the timeline's a steroid, publishing is a steroid. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those because one, they're interesting. You kind of, on the one hand, you get it because you already know that. When somebody says, oh, it's Die Hard, but on a boat, I already know what that movie's about. Like I could grasp it really quickly. So whenever possible, I look for that. It's just all about reducing cognitive load. I have a silly gas can that's on my shelf here to remind me, learners can only pay attention for so long. We have a limited amount of energy that we can put into something, just like your car can only drive so long. That we need to be mindful of how much energy and attention people can really give us before we run out of it. Yes. eLearning roid rage.
Great. And then the other question from Jonathan Hill is if you have any thoughts on a searchable Wikipedia-style database to support content delivery.
I mean, I'm not sure. I'd have to hear more about like what our real goals are for that. If it's searchable and you don't have goals, then you're just looking for your own interest, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed by it. So I guess I'd have to hear a little bit more about them. I'm a big fan of wikis. I love especially now that wikis are more modern, just the idea that everybody can contribute and share and put information doesn't mean that they will. So there's a weird sort of motivational element of it too, where it's like you have to include those incentives as well. I've in grad school, I was like the king of wikis, and I launched 100 different wikis, and all of them failed because people weren't interested in all the work. And that's why I donate to Wikipedia, because I think it's so fantastic that people go and contribute and share and devote that. But it's more the exception than the rule. Maybe I'm not following your question totally right, but that's my take.
Jay Hill, go ahead and add any clarifiers in the chat if you have any. And with that, how about we go to elephant food?
Yeah. So this is sort of like the companion that if you've read Julie Dirkson's book, Design for How People Learn, congratulations. If you haven't, you really should go out and get it. It's a wonderful book. It's one of my favorite books on learning. In it, this metaphor comes from her. She got it from someone named Jonathan Haidt, who said that the rider is your conscious, controlled thought. The elephant is everything else. And this was a metaphor that just speaks so well to me as far as like what people are really going to do. The rider is that rational part. Hey, I'm in control. I'm controlling my impulses. I'm thinking long term. The rider is the person that goes shopping with me when I go to Best Buy and keeps me from coming home with 100 large screen TVs. The rider says, you don't need that, or let's think about it. Think it over. Where the elephant's like, ooh, look at that. Look at that one. That'd be great in the game room. Hey, we can put that in the living room. Hey, let's do that. Yeah, never have a rider at Target. Yeah, I mean, that happens. That we have the elephant that just kind of goes with what feels right. It's automatic. It's visceral. It's curious. It's playful. This is, an animal metaphor, but it really is what I like most about people. Why I liked being a kindergarten teacher. They're silly little elephants that have hilarious little impulses and have all these little things that they want to do. So I like this. We'll give you a couple more examples here. The rider knows it's time to get up, but the elephant knows where the snooze button is. And we all have been the rider, and we all have been the elephant. Same thing with food. The rider knows the fried food is bad for you, but the elephant wants fat and salt. Jonathan's hit snooze with his nose. That's awesome. The writer has the discipline to return those emails at the end of the day. Maybe I should put it off till tomorrow. The elephant finds that excuse. So let's pause here and kind of give me some examples of elephant and riders that you can think of here. Because it's such a great metaphor. It's such a good way, I think, to kind of get at the like, I know I should, but it's also hard. And it's important to remember the elephant in the room, that your learners need engaging, interesting things. Jonathan might have just won the chat. Yeah. The content is the rider, the elephant is the chat. Well, that gets a boo? Oh, I think being an elephant is honorable. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So, Karl, when you work with clients, have you brought up this analogy, and how have they responded to it?
If I'm working with somebody in accounting, I will skip it. If I'm working with a trainer or somebody who's trying to make things interesting, I like to bring it up and to just say, hey, you know what, there's different ways that it makes more sense when you sort of introduce it. And then you say, okay, what are different ways that we can appeal to the elephant? We tell the elephant stories. We tell the elephants what other elephants are doing. We tell give the elephants really the problem is that we put together our training and we focus so hard on making it accurate that we can kind of forget the memorable part, and that we want it to be interesting. We want those synapses to fire. So by ignoring the sort of joke I make is like the elephant in the room is that a lot of our training isn't very effective. And the sort of irony of that is it's because we are ignoring the elephant in the room. Like there are people that are interested in things, and it needs to feel relevant, and it needs to have stories and be interesting, not just detailed. So I would say, Cara, that it's sort of a mixed response. Some people like the metaphor and they go with it, and other people are like, can you just make our training? I see some good learners here. Learners' elephants can be anything from the temperature, the amount of time the presenter, all the Toastmasters in the house. Yeah. Has work to get on with the elephant, but also wants that next career move. Yeah. Yeah. The rider learning a new technology. It takes discipline. It's hard. You're like, I don't want to use this anymore. I think there's some real Jonathan Rock, there's some real elephant type things in there. Yeah, Mark, that's the thing I love to wrap it up with. Like, if you could appeal to sort of your primal curious side and get me actually interested in it and actually thinking about it like an elephant, I'm not going to forget, because I'm really, Laura says, no, just train me. So these are a couple of my little elephants. I was a kindergarten teacher. These are my kids riding around in a little Jeep. So they are all 4 years apart. The twins are in the back there. My oldest is 6. The little guy's 3, or he's 7 and 3. But these are just little guys out there, very little discipline involved, and they are just going out. Yeah, scenarios, consequences. Let me fail. Let me find out how to get the elephant's attention. Give it success stories. Give it stories where everything went wrong. But the important thing to kind of remember about the elephant is that the elephant is bigger and stronger. Eventually, if our training is not interesting, we are going to lose to the elephant. The rider will be there, but the elephant is the one clicking next, and the elephant is the one taking his chances on the quiz and trying to just get through there. So yes, he is bigger and stronger and has a better memory. So one of the things that I really like to do, rider is a deeper understanding of a topic. The elephant is the next level. Yeah, I don't know if I'm on board with that, Jonathan Hill, but I think the, food for thought. I did promise elephant food. But I really think that this fundamental thing, this picture right here is what I like so much about the metaphor, where it's like, hey, you know what, I can pay attention for a while, but eventually I'm just outmatched here. My phone's blowing up. I've got other things that I want to do. There's other things that are there. Don't bribe foreign officials. Yes. So the elephant and the metaphor, he doesn't stand a chance if we decide that we're done. So if you've read Michael Allen's books, if you've talked about that CCAF model, that's probably my favorite way for engaging the elephant in the room. And that's like, set up the context. And then the next C is give them a challenge. Like, what are we doing in our jobs all the time? We're here, we're sitting at our desk, and then this email comes in, and I'm not sure what to do next. And then the A is some kind of activities that you can do. And then feedback. You get feedback based on what A is. So CCAF, I wish it was more memorable or easy to say, like Addy. But that, to me, is like the best way of engaging an elephant, where it's like, hey, give me a choice to make. Yes, context, challenge, activity, and feedback. I jokingly make a bird sound because I like to be memorable, and I say CACAF because it is hard to remember that acronym, CACAF, CACAF. It sounds like something some sort of tropical bird would do, and I'm all about making it memorable. So throwing in surprise the elephant is one of Julie Dirkson's tips for the, you weren't expecting me to make a bird noise. So you may remember that later, and you may curse me when you're reading something and it says CCAF and you hear a little voice in your head say, CACAF, CACAF. But these are kind of the the lenses that I view the training world through, and that it's like, I like the difference that we make as learning designers. I like the impact that we can have. I understand that it's necessary just to get compliance boxes checked and all that, and I'm down for that, but that is not what I enjoy about our craft. It's the, how do you go through and make this interesting and memorable? Otherwise, we're just making vegetables that go in the trash at the end of the night. So elephant food, I'd like to start sharing more ideas for ways that I've tried to take boring content and make it more interesting. That's something that I've really enjoyed throughout my career, and I'm kind of trying to put together sort of a recipe book so that people that are in this can go through and just sort of like you would with a regular recipe book, you can open it at any old page and just sort of flip through and get some ideas, because it's not that you didn't forget pork chops are delicious. You just haven't made them in a while. And if you see a recipe for it and it's got a new sauce with it, it's like, oh, well, hey, maybe that's something that I could try. And that's sort of something that I think we as a learning community do. Like, we have weird, quirky little jobs where we have to go through and take dry content and make it interesting and memorable. And we can use a number of different tools to do it. So blended learning recipes are ways to combine, take this training or the elephant gets it. Yeah. So blended learning recipes are ways that we can combine both different technologies, but also intrigue. Like, what ingredients can we put in there that make people say, this is good. Can I have more? Yeah. Well, Jonathan, it's archived. What were you doing 7 hours ago?
He's in the UK, so he's.
Okay, well,
yeah.
I was like, man, I get up at 5, but shoot, buddy. Yeah, good for you. Thank you for joining us. I saved a little bit of time at the end for questions. I'll go ahead and put my information up here again, but that's Karl's take. Burning design toast. Ah, yes. Sometimes the easiest things get hard.
Are you going to be around any conferences coming up, Karl? Where can people find you on the conference circuit?
I'm lazy about the conference circuit because I like my kids so much. I hang out with them a lot. I am starting to make more YouTube videos and to put those up on YouTube. If you're in Kentucky and you want to go to an HR conference, I'm at the Kentucky SHRM conference next week. But for the most part, maybe that's something that I need to do better at, applying for more conferences, because I love to share and I love to speak, and you guys even laughed at some of my jokes, so it would be great to do that again. I am barely involved with SHRM, Mark. I put in just because it was local and I could go and share some of these things. Thank you, Jonathan. You rock as well. But yeah, so I tend to stick locally. I do travel a little bit, but my kids are so young that I kind of limit how much traveling I do. And I do a couple webinars throughout the year on storylines. So if you're interested, I have one that's just focused on like screen recordings and screen simulations. And I have recipes that can make those interesting and make them easy to build, because those like, whether you're using Captivate or Storyline, they're really a great way for learners to practice what they're about to do without messing up the stories. And then I do slides for steroids a couple times a year as well, so you can learn all about states and variables and triggers. And I do a little Well, Mark, and anybody else, I encourage you, if you want to join eLearningblends.com, you can hop on my mailing list, and I will let you know as more things are turning up for that.
I think everyone enjoyed this for the most part. So I know that I just love your energy, and I just love how excited you get about this stuff. And I just love your perspective of the chef and the blends. I think it's something different than no one else is doing. So I was super excited that you were able to come on last minute. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not Mike Taylor. He's a fascinating guy, but I'm sure Cara will loop him back in here later.
Hey, if you guys don't know, Mike Taylor and Karl are really good friends. So I thought, if I can't get Mike Taylor, maybe I can get next best thing, Karl. So
yeah. Very different. But yeah, we used to do a show called Fresh Finds, and I miss it. We gotta get him back into the world where we can have more webinars. But yeah.
Yeah, your theme song was lit. I loved it. It's like my favorite.
Thank you. Yeah, I find myself now watching like old rap videos and thinking, how can I make this about e-learning? So maybe I've got another one of those in my future.
I love it. All right, any last questions for Karl? If not, you can reach out to him. He's on Twitter, he's on YouTube, he's on LinkedIn, he has his own website. Reach out to him. Thank you all for being here. If you, again, first time on TLDCast, we would love to get you involved in our community. TLDchat.us is our Slack channel. And yeah, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. It is ground zero here at Ohio State. It's the first day of classes, so should be fun. So all right, well, thanks everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.